On behalf of SPACE, the Syrian Peace Action Center, and the Human Wrongs Festival, I welcome you to Syria Shorts, Portraits from Dystopia. My name is Murhaf Faris, and I am one of the co-founders of SPACE. We are a group of Syrians and Norwegians trying to create spaces for critical reflection and informed discussions about Syria. I will take 5 minutes to say a few words, but before that, I just want to say that there will be a discussion about the Russian intervention in Syria just outside here, right after the event. Two of the films that you will see will be included in an exhibition called Troubled Water by Kunstplatz T10. And tomorrow there will be also a screening of a film called This is Exile, Diaries of Child Refugees, followed by an open discussion. So this evening we will see 4 films about siege, about resistance, about being a refugee, about identity and belonging. But what really brings these films together is that they tell the human story of what we really hear in the news headlines, and they tell the story of the compound struggle that Syrians are having today. Syrians are struggling against despotism, against extremism, against everything that stops them from staying alive. And they are struggling for freedom. It's true that Syrians severely need humanitarian assistance, but they also absolutely are active and full cultural and political actors that are struggling to regain agency over their lives. And it's as important as delivering humanitarian aid to recognize this struggle. These struggles, the Syrian struggles, are so interlinked, so interdependent that we cannot talk about one without talking about the others. In the films that you will see, in Sage, for example, in 1915, you will meet Abu Tayyib and Kivorv, who, both of them, they fled the war. Both of them are struggling to start a new life. But one cannot understand why they actually fled the war without asking why Wasim and her family are living under siege. And to understand that, we have to turn to A Day in a Button, where we see, or we get the sense of the regime, the Assad regime, that's imposing siege on Wasim and her family, which we will see in the film Love During the Siege. In the same way, we cannot talk about refugees without talking about barrel bombs, about the bombardment of hospitals. We cannot talk about ISIS without talking about Assad. Both of them, those two, they come and go together. What I want to say is that contextualization and depoliticization, they don't help Syrians. Syrians are not starving to death because of a natural disaster. They are starving to death because there is a deliberate, systematic use of siege as a method of warfare. There is an initiative called Siege Watch by PAX and the Syria Institute, and they estimate that there is 1 million people living under siege in Syria today. They have identified 50 communities that they are under siege, and 47 of them are besieged by the regime. Hospitals, they don't bomb themselves. The hospital of the Doctors Without Borders in Maraat in Oman that was bombed 3 days ago, it was bombed by either the Russians or the regime. And that's what the head of the MSF France said yesterday. So we know the full story. Why don't we tell the full story? We know who is bombing. We know who is dropping the barrel bombs and attacking civilians. Why should we use the passive voice? Syrians rely on you to tell the full story. One inhabitant from Yarmouk, it's the biggest Palestinian camp in Syria that was besieged, he said, in order to break the siege, you need to break the silence surrounding it. And in order to stop barrel bombs, in order to stop attacks on civilians and on hospitals, we need to be vocal against this. Starvation and siege are preventable. Attacks on hospitals, on schools are preventable. But this situation will not change until we see a substantial pressure on the Assad regime and its allies, Russia and Iran. This is something that not only our leaders can do, this is something that the public can do. Maybe most of you have heard about Madaya. How many of you have heard about Madaya, the city that was besieged? Most of the people have heard about this. And Madaya is not the first, nor the only city in Syria that's besieged. But thanks to the public engagement and to media attention, some aid was delivered to the city. And of course, the city is still under besiege, or under siege. So today, the president of Doctors Without Borders, she said, today in Syria, the abnormal is now normal. The unacceptable is acceptable. She added, we are witness to a collective global failure, end of quote. The only hope for Syrians today is to rely on the public, is to rely on their counterparts around the world to put pressure on their leaders to undo this global failure. Thank you for listening.